Through the dusty window of his aunt's old pickup truck, 15-year-old Samuel Mitchell watched the familiar world disappear behind him. The social worker's words still echoed in his head. "It's the best option, Sam." His fingers traced invisible patterns on the glass, mimicking the way he used to communicate with his mother. 6 months had passed since the accident that took his parents and his voice, but the pain remained as fresh as a new wound. The farmhouse grew larger on the horizon, its weathered walls holding promises of a new life he wasn't sure he wanted. The familiar scent of hay and leather filled his nostrils as Aunt Claire parked near the barn. Uncle Jack's dog training facility sprawled across the property, a maze of kennels and training yards that would now be his home. The sound of barking dogs pierced the air, making Sam's chest tighten. He hadn't spoken a word since the accident, and the doctors called it selective mutism, but Sam knew better. There simply weren't any words left in him that mattered anymore. A sharp, aggressive bark cut through the cacophony of other dogs, drawing Sam's attention to a separate enclosure, set apart from the others. Through the chain-link fence, he caught glimpse of a magnificent German shepherd, its dark fur streaked with silver, pacing like a caged storm. Something in the dog's eyes caught his attention, a familiar pain, a reflection of loss that spoke directly to his soul. Uncle Jack noticed his interest and shook his head gravely. "That's Atlas, former police K9. Best to stay away from him, Sam." The warning only intensified Sam's curiosity. As his aunt led him to his new room, he couldn't shake the image of those intense eyes. That night, lying in an unfamiliar bed, Sam listened to the distant sound of Atlas's occasional barks. There was something in those sounds, not aggression, but a loneliness that resonated with his own. In the darkness, Sam made a silent promise to himself. He would understand what haunted that dog. Even if he couldn't speak his intentions aloud, morning brought chaos as Uncle Jack discovered Atlas had destroyed his kennel's interior. During the night, through his window, Sam watched the frustrated handlers trying to control the dog, but what caught his attention wasn't the destruction. It was the way Atlas stopped mid-snarl when their eyes met across the yard. In that moment, something shifted in the air between them, a recognition that would change both their lives forever. The morning routine at the training facility felt like a choreographed dance that Sam wasn't invited to join. Handlers moved with practiced efficiency, feeding and exercising their charges, while carefully avoiding Atlas's isolated kennel. Sam sat on the back porch, picking at his untouched breakfast, as he watched Uncle Jack approach the German shepherd with measured steps. The clipboard in his uncle's hand held a decision Sam couldn't bear to consider. Euthanasia forms awaiting signatures after Atlas's latest violent episode. Through the kitchen window, Aunt Claire observed her nephew with growing concern. She'd noticed how he tracked Atlas's movements, how his eyes followed the dog with an intensity that reminded her of her late sister's determination. When Sam left his cooling breakfast and walked toward the kennels, she moved to stop him but felt Jack's hand on her shoulder. "Let him look," he whispered, but from a safe distance. They watched as Sam settled on an overturned bucket just outside Atlas's line of sight, his presence somehow different from the usual gawkers. Atlas's behavior shifted subtly throughout the morning. His usual aggressive displays diminished to occasional low growls whenever Sam was nearby. During the afternoon feeding, the dog did something unprecedented. He sat calmly as his food was delivered, his eyes fixed not on the handler, but on the silent boy observing from his bucket. Uncle Jack's weathered face showed the first crack of curiosity breaking through his professional skepticism. He'd never seen Atlas respond this way to anyone, not since the incident that ended his police career. Sam spent hours watching the handlers work with other dogs, his notebook filling with observations about their methods, but his attention always returned to Atlas. The German shepherd's aggression seemed to mask something deeper, a hypervigilance Sam recognized from his own sleepless nights. When Atlas wasn't snarling at handlers, he paced his kennel with military precision, scanning his surroundings as if searching for hidden threats. It was a behavior Sam understood too well, having spent countless hours checking and rechecking doors since the accident that took his parents. As dusk approached and the facility wound down for the day, Sam remained at his post. Uncle Jack found him there, still silent, still watching. Instead of sending him inside, Jack pulled up another bucket and sat beside his nephew. Together they observed Atlas, who had settled into an unusually peaceful rest. "You see something in him, don't you, kid?" Jack asked softly. Sam nodded, And for the first time since arriving, he pulled out his notebook and wrote a single word that would change everything. Pain. The facility's morning meeting was tense. Uncle Jack stood before his staff, Atlas's file open on the desk between them. "We have 2 weeks," he announced, his voice heavy with resignation. "If we can't show significant improvement in his behavior, the board won't reconsider their decision." The handlers exchanged knowing looks. They'd all witnessed Atlas's decline over the past months. Sam, sitting quietly in the corner where Aunt Claire insisted he stay during meetings, felt his chest tighten. His fingers pressed against the notebook in his lap, where he'd spent the night sketching out ideas that no one would understand. During lunch break, while the handlers were busy with their usual routines, Sam slipped away to his observation post, but today was different as he watched Atlas pace. He noticed something he'd missed before. The dog's aggression peaked when handlers approached with training equipment, specifically the heavy leather collar they used for controlled walks. Sam's mind flashed to the police report he'd glimpsed in Atlas's file. Incident occurred during collar restraint training. His hand unconsciously moved to his own throat. Understanding the panic of feeling trapped, Sam made a decision that would either prove Uncle Jack right about maintaining distance or change everything. Moving with deliberate slowness, he placed his notebook on the ground and slid it toward Atlas's kennel using his foot. The German shepherd froze. Watching inside the notebook was Sam's childhood photo with his old family dog. Taken months before the accident, Atlas approached cautiously, his usual aggression replaced by intense curiosity. For the first time, he didn't bark or growl. He simply observed, much like Sam had been doing for days. The connection was interrupted by a handler's shout of alarm. "Sam, get back from there!" The sudden noise startled both boy and dog, but instead of his usual aggressive response, Atlas moved protectively between Sam and the approaching handler. Uncle Jack arrived moments later, drawn by the commotion. He stopped short at the sight before him, his troubled nephew sitting calmly near the kennel, Atlas positioned beside him on the other side of the fence, both of them sharing what could only be described as a moment of perfect understanding. That evening, Uncle Jack called Sam into his office. Maps of the facility covered his desk, and Atlas's file lay open beside them. "I'm probably crazy for considering this," he said, running a hand through his graying hair, "but I saw something today I can't ignore." He pulled out a new form, not the euthanasia papers, but a training program authorization. "You've got 2 weeks to show me I'm not making a mistake." Sam picked up the pen, his hand steady as he signed his name for the first time since the accident. Dawn broke over the training facility as Sam arrived early, carrying his notebook and a small backpack. Inside were items he'd carefully selected: a soft blanket that still carried the scent of his old home, a worn tennis ball, and a package of premium dog treats he'd convinced Aunt Claire to buy. Uncle Jack watched from his office window as his nephew settled into a new spot, closer to Atlas's kennel than anyone had dared sit in months. The other handlers arrived for their shifts, casting worried glances at the scene unfolding before them. Sam's approach was unlike anything the facility had seen. Instead of trying to establish dominance or control, he simply existed in Atlas's space. He pulled out his homework, working on math problems while occasionally rolling the tennis ball between his fingers. Atlas watched every movement, his usual pacing replaced by an alert stillness. When Sam unwrapped his lunch sandwich, breaking off small pieces to casually toss near the kennel, the dog's acceptance of the offering made one of the veteran handlers drop their coffee cup in shock. The breakthrough came during the afternoon cleaning routine. Atlas typically had to be distracted or intimidated into moving to the secondary enclosure while his kennel was cleaned. Today, as the handlers approached with their usual apprehension, Sam stood and walked deliberately to the transfer gate. He held up his notebook, showing a simple drawing of Atlas moving between the kennels. The dog studied the image, then looked at Sam, who nodded once and pointed to the secondary enclosure. To everyone's amazement, Atlas followed the silent instruction. Calm and focused, word of the morning's events spread quickly through the facility. During the afternoon break, Uncle Jack found himself fielding calls from other trainers and even the board members who'd signed Atlas's euthanasia order. But his attention was drawn to the scene outside his window, where Sam was introducing something new. The soft blanket the boy sat reading, the fabric draped partially into the kennel. Atlas approached cautiously, sniffing the offering before settling beside it, closer to Sam than he'd allowed anyone in weeks. As evening approached, Aunt Claire brought dinner to Sam, who refused to leave his post. She found him making notes in his book, dozens of detailed observations about Atlas's behaviors and responses. When she glanced at the pages, her breath caught. Alongside the notes were conversations, full sentences Sam had written to Atlas throughout the day. Her nephew hadn't communicated this much since the accident. Looking between the boy and the dog, she realized that somehow these two broken souls were helping each other find their way back to the world. The first week passed in a blur of small victories and subtle changes. Sam had established a routine that Atlas seemed to anticipate. Their mornings started with shared breakfast. Sam eating his toast while Atlas enjoyed his meal, without the usual aggression towards the feeding handlers. During lunch break, whispers circulated among the staff as they watched the unlikely pair. The same dog that had sent 3 handlers to the hospital now waited patiently while Sam methodically introduced new objects into his environment. Each one carefully documented in the ever-present notebook. A setback occurred mid-morning when a new delivery driver's truck backfired near the kennels. Atlas's reaction was immediate and violent, lunging at the fence with a ferocity that sent nearby staff scrambling for safety. But instead of retreating, Sam stood his ground. His body language remained calm even as his heart raced. He pulled out his notebook, holding it up so Atlas could see the familiar pages. The dog's attention shifted, his aggressive display gradually subsiding as he focused on the boy who hadn't run, who hadn't shown fear. Uncle Jack, watching from a distance, finally understood what his nephew had known all along. Atlas's aggression wasn't about dominance. It was about fear. That afternoon, Sam introduced something that made the entire staff hold their breath. Music, through his small portable speaker. He played the classical pieces his mother used to listen to while working. Atlas's initial confusion was evident, his ears twitching at the unfamiliar sounds. But as Bach's cello suite No. 1 filled the air, the tension in his powerful body began to ease. Sam wrote in his notebook, "Music is to Mom's medicine." Aunt Claire, reading over his shoulder later, had to turn away to hide her tears. Her sister had always said music could heal anything. The real test came when Uncle Jack announced it was time to attempt handling Atlas for his medical checkup. Previous attempts had required multiple handlers and heavy sedation. Sam wrote a detailed plan in his notebook, showing it to his uncle. No restraints, no force, just trust. Against his better judgment, Jack agreed to try it, Sam's way, as the facility vet approached. Sam sat calmly reading his book, the soothing music playing softly. Atlas remained alert but composed, his eyes darting between Sam and the vet for the first time in months. They were able to complete a basic examination without incident. As twilight settled over the facility, Sam made his boldest move yet, with Uncle Jack watching nervously from a safe distance. The boy retrieved something from his backpack, his father's old police badge saved from the accident. He held it up to the kennel fence, letting Atlas catch the familiar scent of leather and metal. The dog's reaction was profound. He approached slowly, nose twitching, a low whine escaping his throat. In his notebook, Sam wrote what everyone had failed to see. He's not an aggressive dog, he's a police dog who lost his partner too. The parallel between their losses hung in the air like an unspoken truth. The facility's monthly board meeting was scheduled for the afternoon, and tension filled the air. Sam spent the morning with Atlas, their routine now so natural, it seemed they'd been doing it forever. The notebook between them contained not just observations anymore, but conversations. Sam writing his thoughts and Atlas responding with subtle changes in posture and expression that only the boy could fully interpret. A small pile of equipment lay nearby. The old police badge, the music player, and a worn leather leash Sam had carefully chosen from Uncle Jack's supply room. Dr. Reynolds, the facility's head veterinarian, arrived early to observe before the board meeting. Her presence made the handlers nervous. Her opinion would heavily influence the final decision about Atlas's fate. She watched silently as Sam went through his morning routine, her experienced eyes noting how the dog's body language had transformed from defensive to attentive. When Sam pulled out the leash, she instinctively stepped forward to intervene, but Uncle Jack held her back. "Watch," he whispered, his own heart racing as his nephew attempted something they'd all failed to achieve. Sam's movements were deliberate and unhurried. As he opened the kennel gate for the first time, Atlas remained perfectly still, watching as the boy who'd never spoken a word to him entered his space. The entire facility seemed to hold its breath. Sam knelt slowly, holding out his father's police badge first, their shared talisman of trust. Atlas approached, gently touching his nose to the badge before sitting beside Sam. Their routine now entering uncharted territory. With trembling hands, Sam reached for the leash, and in a moment that would be talked about for years to come, Atlas lowered his head to accept it. The sound that broke the silence wasn't a bark or a growl, but something that brought tears to Aunt Claire's eyes. Sam's voice, barely a whisper, cracking from months of disuse. "Good boy." The words seemed to unlock something in both of them. Atlas pressed closer, his whole body relaxing as Sam's hand rested on his fur. Reynolds scribbled furiously in her notepad, while Uncle Jack gripped the fence for support, his professional composure cracking at the sight of his nephew speaking. For the first time since the accident, later that afternoon, as the board members reviewed Dr. Reynolds's report, Sam sat in his usual spot with Atlas, reading aloud from his notebook for the first time. His voice was soft and halting, but the words flowed easier with each passing minute. The story he read wasn't just about a troubled dog's rehabilitation. It was about two broken souls finding their way back to life together. Through the office window, Aunt Claire watched her nephew's lips move, forming the words that had been locked away for so long, while Atlas lay beside him, guardian and protector, both of them finally breaking free from their private prisons of silence. Word spread quickly through the local community about the miraculous transformation at the training facility. Sam's morning walks with Atlas around the perimeter of the property became a quiet spectacle, drawing attention from passing neighbors who slowed their cars to watch the once-feared dog walking calmly beside the boy. The sight of them together, the troubled police K9 and the formerly mute teenager, became a symbol of hope that even the deepest wounds could heal. Sam still carried his notebook, but now he used it less for communication and more for documenting their daily progress. During their morning session, Uncle Jack approached with news that made Sam's hand tighten slightly on Atlas's leash. The police department had requested a visit. Officer Martinez, Atlas's former handler's supervisor, wanted to evaluate the dog's progress. Sam wrote his concerns in the notebook, showing them to his uncle. "Atlas isn't ready for police work anymore. He needs a different purpose." Jack nodded, understanding passing between them. "I know, kid, but they need to see this. They need to understand what you've discovered." Sam looked down at Atlas, who sat patiently beside him waiting for their next move. The visit was scheduled for the afternoon. Sam spent the morning preparing, arranging Atlas's favorite items, the soft blanket, the music player, and most importantly, his father's police badge, near their usual training spot. When Officer Martinez arrived in his patrol car, Atlas's posture stiffened, but his eyes remained locked on Sam, waiting for reassurance. Sam's voice, growing stronger each day, quietly commanded, "Stay." The word carried years of police training memory, and Atlas responded instinctively, settling into a perfect sitting position. Officer Martinez's eyebrows rose in surprise at the display of control. What followed was an unexpected demonstration of trust. Rather than showcasing standard police dog commands, Sam illustrated something entirely different. He demonstrated how Atlas now helped younger dogs at the facility calm down during thunderstorms, how he could sense anxiety in other animals and respond with a gentle presence. Through soft-spoken explanations and practical demonstrations, Sam revealed Atlas's transformation from a security asset to something perhaps more valuable, a healing presence. Officer Martinez watched in amazement as the dog that had been deemed too dangerous for service now gently guided a nervous young puppy through basic training exercises. The sun was setting when Officer Martinez finally prepared to leave. He knelt before Sam and Atlas, his expression thoughtful. "You've given him a new mission, son," he said, reaching out slowly to pat Atlas's head, something unthinkable just weeks ago. "Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is change course." He left Sam with a business card and an invitation that would change everything. The department's K9 therapy training program needed demonstration dogs for their new handlers. Atlas, with his unique journey from police dog to therapy animal, could help shape the future of K9 training. Sam's hand found Atlas's fur as they watched the patrol car drive away, both understanding that their shared path had just opened up to new possibilities. Monday morning brought a new challenge to the facility. A local family had arrived with their German Shepherd, Rex, who had developed severe anxiety after a home invasion. The sight of the trembling dog stirred something in Sam, who recognized the same fear he'd first seen in Atlas. Uncle Jack gathered his staff, including Sam, now officially part of the training team, to discuss the case. When Sam raised his hand to volunteer, Jack smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that, but this time, you'll need to do more than write in your notebook. They need to hear your voice." Sam spent the morning observing Rex while Atlas lay calmly nearby. The boy's notebook filled with observations. Tail tucked, ears back, avoiding eye contact, same signs Atlas showed. The family watched anxiously as their once confident pet cowered in the corner of the temporary kennel. Sam approached them slowly, his voice soft but steady as he explained his plan. "Atlas was like this too," he said, each word carefully chosen. "Sometimes the ones who are most afraid just need someone who understands their fear." The mother wiped away tears as she watched her son, about Sam's age, nod in recognition. The breakthrough came during the afternoon session. Sam demonstrated how he'd originally connected with Atlas. Using calm presence and shared experiences, rather than traditional training methods, he taught the family's son, Michael, how to sit quietly with Rex, showing him the importance of patience and understanding. Atlas played his part perfectly, demonstrating the confident but gentle demeanor that had become his trademark. When Rex finally emerged from his corner to investigate Atlas, Sam caught Michael's eye and nodded encouragingly. "Tell him what you told me," Sam said softly, "about the night it happened." Michael sat on the ground, his voice trembling as he began to speak to Rex about the break-in, about his own fears, about how he'd felt helpless to protect his family. Rex's ears perked up at his owner's voice, and slowly, cautiously, the dog moved closer. Sam watched the interaction while documenting every detail, Atlas a steady presence beside him. Uncle Jack, observing from the office window, saw not the traumatized nephew who'd arrived months ago, but a confident young trainer emerging from his shell. The transformation went both ways. As Sam helped others heal, his own wounds began to fade. As the day drew to a close, Michael and Rex had made significant progress, mirroring the journey Sam and Atlas had begun weeks ago. The family scheduled regular sessions, and Sam found himself explaining his methods to Uncle Jack's senior trainers. His voice grew stronger with each explanation, his notebook now filled with not just observations, but teaching notes and training plans. That evening, as Sam sat with Atlas reviewing the day's events, Aunt Claire overheard him reading his notes aloud, his words clear and purposeful. "Sometimes the best teachers are the ones who needed the most help themselves." The success with Rex and Michael brought new attention to the facility. Local news caught wind of the story, and requests for interviews started pouring in. Uncle Jack fielded most of them, protecting Sam from unwanted publicity. But one request stood out. The Children's Hospital wanted to know if Sam and Atlas could visit their pediatric trauma ward. The invitation sat on Jack's desk for days while he watched his nephew working with Rex and other dogs, noting how Sam's confidence grew with each successful session. Finally, he showed Sam the letter, watching as his nephew's eyes widened at the possibility. The preparation for the hospital visit consumed their week. Sam worked with Atlas on new commands specifically designed for a medical environment. Whisper quiet responses, gentle approaches, and most importantly, how to recognize when someone needed space rather than interaction. Aunt Claire helped Sam prepare a presentation about animal therapy, watching proudly as he practiced speaking in fuller sentences, his voice growing stronger with each rehearsal. The notebook remained close, but now it contained more plans than fears, more future than past. Their first day at the hospital tested everything they'd learned together. The sterile environment, with its beeping machines and antiseptic smell, initially set Atlas on edge. Sam knelt beside him in the elevator, whispering reassurances learned from their own journey through trauma. When they entered the pediatric ward, Sam saw himself in every child's eyes, the same look of loss, of words trapped behind walls of pain. Atlas sensed it too, his demeanor shifting to something softer, more intuitive. They moved from room to room, and Sam found himself sharing their story, each telling making it easier to speak. The most profound moment came in the room of a young girl who hadn't spoken since a car accident 3 months ago, a mirror of Sam's own experience. Her parents watched in amazement as Sam sat quietly beside her bed, Atlas resting his head gently on the mattress. Instead of pressuring her to talk, Sam showed her his notebook, sharing entries from his own silent days. He demonstrated how he'd communicated with Atlas through gestures and expressions, teaching her that healing had its own timeline. When she reached out to touch Atlas's fur, her first voluntary movement in weeks, the nurse had to step out of the room to compose herself. That evening, as they drove home, Sam wrote in his notebook while Atlas dozed in the back seat, Uncle Jack glanced over at his nephew's writing. Today, we learned that our story isn't just ours anymore. The implications of this realization hung in the air. Their journey from trauma to healing had become a bridge for others. Back at the facility, Sam added a new section to his training notes titled Hospital Protocols. His handwriting steady as he documented everything they'd learned, Atlas watched from his customary spot, no longer the aggressive canine that needed saving, but a partner in helping others find their way back to life. A rainy Tuesday brought an unexpected visitor to the facility. Detective Sarah Morris, the investigating officer from Sam's parents' accident, she stood in Uncle Jack's office, her expression gentle as she explained her presence. The anniversary of the accident was approaching, and she'd been following Sam's progress through Officer Martinez's reports. The sight of her badge made Sam's hands tremble, but Atlas pressed against his leg, grounding him in the present. Detective Morris had brought something with her, a sealed evidence bag containing his mother's journal. Finally cleared for release, the journal sat unopened on Sam's desk for hours, while he went through his daily routines with Atlas. Training sessions with Rex and other dogs provided a welcome distraction, but the leather-bound book seemed to call to him from across the room. That evening, after the facility had quieted, Sam finally found the courage to open it. Atlas lay beside him as he turned the pages, his mother's familiar handwriting bringing both comfort and pain. Among her final entries, he found something that made his breath catch. Notes about wanting to start a therapy dog program at her school, where she'd worked as a counselor. Memories flooded back as Sam read. Conversations about healing through connection. His mother's belief that animals could reach places in the heart that words couldn't touch. Atlas watched as tears finally fell. Tears Sam had held back for months. The boy who had been strong for so long allowed himself to break. His arms wrapped around his dog's neck as Atlas stayed steady, returning the favor of unwavering support that Sam had shown him through his tears. Sam found his voice growing stronger, reading his mother's words aloud to Atlas, letting her dreams mingle with what they'd already begun to build. The next morning, Sam arrived at Uncle Jack's office with his notebook and his mother's journal. His voice was clear as he laid out a proposal, expanding the facility's program to include school visits. Combining his mother's vision with what he'd learned through Atlas, Jack listened as his nephew detailed plans for working with school counselors, creating a bridge between animal therapy and traditional counseling. The boy who had arrived unable to speak was now presenting a full program outline, his mother's legacy living on through a path neither of them could have imagined. That afternoon, Sam took Atlas to visit his parents' grave for the first time since the funeral. He sat in the grass, reading aloud from both his notebook and his mother's journal, sharing their journey and his plans for the future. Atlas remained vigilant but gentle, understanding the weight of this moment. When Sam finally stood to leave, his voice was steady as he promised his parents he would continue their work of healing others. The setting sun cast long shadows as boy and dog walked back to Uncle Jack's truck, their silhouettes merging with the golden light. Two broken souls who had found not just healing, but purpose in their pain. The school board meeting was scheduled for early morning, and Sam found himself adjusting his tie, a gift from Uncle Jack for the occasion. His mother's journal and his own notebook lay prepared on the passenger seat as Atlas sat alertly in the back of the SUV. The proposal to introduce animal therapy into the district's counseling program had gained unexpected support, particularly after the success at the Children's Hospital. Principal Stevens, who had worked with Sam's mother, specifically requested that both Sam and Atlas attend the presentation. The school hallways felt both familiar and strange as Sam walked them for the first time since the accident. Atlas moved professionally beside him, their training evident in every step. Teachers who had known his mother stopped to watch them pass, seeing echoes of her compassion in her son's determined stride. Outside the boardroom, Sam paused to gather his thoughts, his hand finding comfort in Atlas's fur. The dog's steady presence reminded him of how far they'd come from those first silent days at the facility. When the doors opened, Sam entered not as a troubled teen but as a young professional with a vision. His presentation wove together personal experience with professional insight. Sam spoke about the power of connection in healing trauma, demonstrating with Atlas how animal therapy could reach students struggling with their own silences. He shared carefully chosen excerpts from his mother's journal, her words about emotional healing through animal bonds resonating with the educators present. When he described how Atlas had helped him find his voice again, Several board members wiped away tears. The transformation from the mute boy they remembered to the articulate young man before them was its own powerful testimony. Questions from the board were thoughtful and challenging. Sam answered each one with growing confidence, his voice steady as he outlined safety protocols, training requirements, and expected outcomes. Atlas demonstrated impeccable behavior, responding to silent hand signals, and positioning himself protectively near a nervous board member who had admitted to being afraid of dogs. By the end of the session, Principal Stevens was already discussing logistics for a pilot program. Starting with the schools where his mother had worked, the vote was unanimous. Sam's program would begin next semester. After the meeting, Sam found himself in his mother's old office, now occupied by the new school counselor. The familiar view from her window brought a fresh wave of emotion, but it no longer paralyzed him. Atlas sat beside him as he shared stories about his mother with her successor, speaking freely about their shared passion for helping others heal. On her desk, he placed a framed photo of his mother with her first therapy dog, alongside a new one of him and Atlas, past and present aligned in a way that felt right, like pieces of a puzzle finally finding their proper place. As they left the school, Sam's notebook had a new entry. Mom's dream didn't die with her. It just needed a different voice to carry it forward. Officer Martinez's call came on a busy Thursday morning. The police department's K-9 Training Academy was hosting an open house, and they wanted Sam and Atlas to give a presentation on trauma recovery and rehabilitation. The invitation carried special weight. Many of Atlas's former handlers would be there, along with the training staff who had once deemed him too dangerous to save. Sam spent hours preparing, reviewing his notes and training logs, wanting to show them not just what Atlas had become, but what they had achieved together. The academy grounds stirred mixed emotions in Atlas. His alert posture and twitching ears revealed memories of his previous life. Sam moved slowly, giving his partner time to adjust to the familiar surroundings that had once been home. Other K-9 units watched with interest as they made their way to the training area, handlers whispering among themselves about the infamous dog who had attacked his trainer. But Atlas's calm demeanor told a different story now. His focus completely on Sam as they prepared for their demonstration. The presentation began with their story. Sam's voice strong and clear as he shared their parallel journeys through trauma and recovery. He explained how traditional training methods had failed Atlas, not because they were wrong, but because they didn't address the underlying trauma. Using a young K-9 in training as a volunteer, Sam demonstrated how fear responses could be misread as aggression, and how patience and understanding could transform that fear into trust. Atlas worked flawlessly with the rookie dog, displaying the gentle leadership that had made him invaluable at the facility. During the Q&A session, a gruff veteran handler raised his hand. He introduced himself as Atlas's original trainer, the one who had first spotted his potential for police work. His eyes were moist as he approached them, acknowledging how wrong they had all been about Atlas's aggressive nature. Sam listened as the man described Atlas's early days, filling in pieces of his partner's history he had never known. The trainer's final words resonated through the room. Sometimes the best police dogs aren't the ones who learn to attack, but the ones who learn to heal. The day ended with an unexpected honor. The academy director asked if Atlas and Sam would consider becoming regular contributors to their training program, helping to develop new protocols for working with traumatized canines. As they walked back to Uncle Jack's truck, Sam reflected on how far they'd come from those first silent days at the facility. His notebook held a new entry. Today, Atlas showed them that strength isn't about power. It's about having the courage to become something different than what the world expected you to be. The autumn morning started like any other, until Sam noticed Atlas's unusual behavior during their routine walk. The normally attentive dog kept turning his head toward the facility's far fence line, his body tense but not aggressive. Sam had learned to trust these subtle signals. Atlas's police training, combined with their deep bond, often picked up things others missed. Following his partner's lead, Sam discovered a damaged section of fencing, and beyond it, fresh tire tracks that shouldn't have been there. His hand instinctively reached for his phone to alert Uncle Jack when a sound caught his attention. Whimpering, barely audible, coming from the nearby brush. What they found made Sam's blood run cold. 3 puppies, barely 8 weeks old. Abandoned in a taped-up box, Atlas's demeanor shifted instantly from alert to nurturing, carefully nosing at the box while Sam called for help. Within minutes, the facility erupted into action. Aunt Claire brought blankets while Uncle Jack contacted local authorities, the facility's vet, Dr. Reynolds arrived quickly to examine the puppies. Praising Sam's quick response as she worked, Sam noticed Atlas's protective positioning. The former police dog had seamlessly transitioned into a guardian role. The investigation revealed security camera footage of a vehicle dumping the box before dawn. Officer Martinez arrived to take the report, but his presence was also personal. He'd seen firsthand how Sam and Atlas worked with troubled animals. The decision was made to keep the puppies at the facility temporarily, under Sam and Atlas's care. It would be their biggest challenge yet, 3 traumatized puppies needing not just physical care, but emotional rehabilitation. Sam's notebook quickly filled with observations and care schedules, his voice steady as he discussed treatment plans with Dr. Reynolds. Atlas's interaction with the puppies revealed new depths to his transformation. The dog, who had once been deemed too dangerous for service, now showed infinite patience as the puppies crawled over him. Teaching them confidence through play and gentle discipline, Sam documented everything, recognizing that their experience could help develop protocols for rehabilitating abandoned animals. The local news caught wind of the story, but this time Sam chose to speak up, not for publicity but to raise awareness about animal abandonment and the importance of proper rehabilitation. That evening, as Sam sat reviewing his notes while the puppies slept in their carefully prepared enclosure, Atlas vigilant beside them, Uncle Jack joined him. "You know," he said quietly, "6 months ago, I wouldn't have believed Atlas could be trusted near puppies." Sam nodded, understanding the significance. His latest notebook entry captured the day's essence. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us become our greatest opportunity to help others. Atlas and I understand that better than anyone. The success with the rescued puppies opened new doors. The local animal shelter reached out, hoping to implement Sam and Atlas's rehabilitation methods. As winter approached, Sam found himself dividing time between the school program, police academy training, and now shelter consultations. Each rescued puppy had been successfully placed in carefully selected homes, their transformations adding another chapter to Sam and Atlas's growing legacy. The quiet boy who once couldn't speak now confidently led training sessions, his voice strong and sure as he shared their methodology with others. A letter arrived from the state's Canine Training Association, inviting them to speak at their annual conference. The topic wasn't just about rehabilitation. They wanted Sam to present his innovative approach to trauma-informed animal training. Uncle Jack watched his nephew prepare the presentation, remembering the silent, broken child who had arrived at his door. Now Sam stood before the mirror, practicing his speech, Atlas a steady presence beside him, both of them examples of how tragedy could transform into purpose. The notebook that had once been his only voice now served as a professional journal, documenting successes and lessons learned. The day before the conference, something unexpected happened. Michael and Rex, their first success story, visited the facility. Michael was no longer the frightened boy they'd first met. He'd started a peer support group at his school for other teenagers dealing with trauma. Rex, once terrified and aggressive, now helped Michael demonstrate to other kids how to overcome their fears. Sam sat with Michael, comparing notes and sharing experiences, their conversation flowing easily between 2 young men who understood the healing power of the bond between human and dog. Atlas and Rex played nearby, their reformed behaviors a testament to the effectiveness of Sam's methods. During their evening routine, Sam discovered Atlas limping slightly, age and their busy schedule beginning to show. The sight sparked a new idea, one that had been forming in his mind for weeks. That night, he drafted a proposal for Uncle Jack, a dedicated rehabilitation center within the facility, specifically designed for traumatized animals and their human companions. His mother's journal lay open beside him as he worked, her words about healing through connection weaving through his plans. The center would combine her vision of therapy with his experience in trauma recovery, creating something entirely new. Sam's presentation at the conference would include this vision, not just of rehabilitation, but of prevention and education. His notebook's latest entry reflected his growing understanding. What Atlas taught me wasn't just about healing from the past. It was about building a future where trauma doesn't have to define us. Every being, human or animal, deserves the chance to rewrite their story. As he finished writing, Atlas rested his head on Sam's lap. both of them aware that their journey had become something far bigger than their own recovery. 1 year had passed since Sam first arrived at the facility. The morning sun cast long shadows across the training yard as he sat in his usual spot, Atlas beside him, watching the facility come to life. The renovation plans for the new rehabilitation center lay approved on Uncle Jack's desk, while the school program had expanded to 3 districts. Sam's notebook, now accompanied by a laptop, contained the framework for a training manual that would help others implement their methods. The silent boy and the aggressive dog had transformed not just themselves, but an entire community's approach to healing. The day's first appointment arrived, a family with their teenage daughter. Emma, who hadn't spoken since witnessing a violent crime, Sam recognized the look in her eyes, the same one he'd seen in his own reflection months ago. Atlas moved with practiced grace, instinctively positioning himself near but not too close to the girl. Sam shared his story, not from memory but from the heart, watching as Emma's rigid posture gradually softened. When she finally reached out to touch Atlas's fur, her parents cried quietly in the background. Sam's own voice, once lost to trauma, guided her gently toward her first whispered word in months. Safe? Later that afternoon, Officer Martinez brought a newly retired police dog struggling to adjust to civilian life. As Sam worked with them, he caught sight of his reflection in the training room window, no longer the broken child who arrived here, but a confident young man who had found his calling. Atlas, grey now touching his muzzle, demonstrated for the younger dog how to release the hypervigilance that came with years of service. Sam's methods, born from their shared pain and recovery, had become a blueprint for others facing similar challenges. The facility hosted an open house that evening, celebrating both their expansion and the anniversary of Sam and Atlas's arrival. Families whose lives they'd touched gathered to share stories. Michael and Rex, now certified therapy team themselves, Emma speaking softly but clearly about her progress, retired canines and their handlers who had found new purpose through their program. Uncle Jack's speech was brief but powerful, ending with the announcement that the new rehabilitation center would be named after Sam's mother, honoring the vision that had unknowingly set this all in motion. As twilight settled over the facility, Sam sat alone with Atlas in their spot, his final notebook entry of the day illuminated by the setting sun. Some say tragedy breaks us, but Atlas taught me different. It's not about going back to who we were before loss changed us. It's about becoming something new, something stronger, not despite our wounds but because of them. In the end, healing isn't just about recovery, it's about discovery. Every broken piece, when mended with love and purpose, becomes part of a larger picture we couldn't see before. Atlas rested his head on Sam's lap, both of them understanding that their story wasn't ending. It was still being written in the lives they continued to touch, one silent understanding at a time,